She entered the courtroom as if the rules didn't apply, shoulders back, lips curved in quiet mockery. When questioned, she didn't explain. She declared. 2 words fell heavy with entitlement: diplomatic immunity. The room froze. Gasps rippled. For one dangerous moment, she thought she had won. Then, Judge Judy leaned forward, calm, razor-sharp, and with one precise sentence erased the illusion of power she never truly had. Seconds later, the courtroom erupted, and what Judge Judy ordered next changed everything. Before we dive in, tell me where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. The door opened before the bailiff could announce her. A slow sweep of perfume and entitlement drifted into the courtroom, as if arrogance itself had arrived early and chosen the best seat. She walked in with a poise that did not just command attention, it demanded submission, shoulders back, chin lifted, a faint smile shaped like a blade. Her heels struck the floor in a rhythm too confident for someone facing judgment. Even before she spoke, everyone understood exactly how she viewed the world. Rules were for other people. The camera, or what felt like one, followed her down the center aisle, catching the subtle flicker in the faces she passed. Discomfort, curiosity, a whisper of disbelief. Her presence changed the temperature of the room, cooling it by degrees. It was the kind of entrance people make when they believe the ending is already written in their favor. Judge Judy watched her quietly from the bench, hands folded, expression unreadable. Her stillness created more pressure than any raised voice could have. She studied the woman's posture, the smug tilt of her chin, the way she avoided looking at the plaintiff, as if even eye contact would grant the other woman a dignity she did not deserve. The plaintiff, standing small but steady at her podium, clutched her papers with the grip of someone holding on to truth for dear life. She did not blink. She did not bow. But her breathing betrayed the months of fear that had brought her here. The defendant finally reached her table. She set down her handbag with a deliberate theatrical grace, then offered the courtroom a smile that felt less like courtesy and more like a warning. "I assume," she said softly, "that proceedings will be brief." The words hung in the air, dripping with condescension, heavy with certainty. No one replied. The silence felt like the courtroom itself was assessing her. Judge Judy leaned back slightly. "Is that so?" The defendant nodded, still smiling. "Yes, I am here out of respect for the show, of course. But let us be clear before we begin. This situation does not concern me. I am protected. Diplomatic protocol applies, and I am untouchable." A murmur rippled across the audience like a shift in wind. Her confidence expanded to fill the space, too large, too loud, even without raising her voice. But something subtle betrayed her, the way her fingers brushed her handbag twice, quick and nervous, as though something hidden inside mattered more than she wanted anyone to know. Judge Judy did not move, did not blink. Her silence tightened the air until even the defendant's smile began to strain. Then, slowly, with the precision of someone preparing to remove the foundation from a towering structure, Judy spoke. "Before we begin," she said, her voice a calm razor, "I want you to understand something about this courtroom, and about the limits of the power you think you have." Her laugh arrived before her words did, light, dismissive, and sharpened just enough to cut the air. It was the kind of laugh people use when they believe the world is a stage built solely for their performance. Judge Judy's face did not change, but the plaintiff flinched, as if the sound itself carried the memory of months she could never forget. The defendant adjusted the cuffs of her immaculate blazer, letting the fabric fall into place with deliberate elegance. "Your Honor," she began, "I think we are all wasting time here. This young woman," she gestured vaguely toward the plaintiff without turning her head, "has been misled. She misunderstands how diplomatic households operate." Her tone dripped a poisonous mix of pity and superiority. The plaintiff swallowed hard, her fingers tightening around her folder, yet she did not lower her eyes. Judge Judy raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" "Yes," the defendant continued, sliding effortlessly into the role of international authority. "In my culture, expectations are different, responsibilities are different, loyalty is expected." She flashed a tight smile. "If she found that uncomfortable, that is a cultural mismatch, not misconduct." A soft rustle moved through the audience. The comparison wasn't just dismissive, it was dehumanizing. The plaintiff stepped forward slightly. "I was not uncomfortable," she said quietly. "I was trapped." The defendant's eyes sharpened. "Trapped?" she scoffed. "You lived in a diplomatic residence. You ate at my table. You used my car service. You were treated with generosity." The narrator within the room, the lens through which every face seemed to react, caught the moment Judy's expression shifted. Only a fraction, but enough. "Generosity?" Judy repeated. "That is an interesting word for unpaid labor." The defendant waved a manicured hand. "Compensation was pending approval. My husband was between assignments. Paperwork takes time." The plaintiff shook her head. "You told me asking for pay was disrespectful. You took my passport." A cold crackle ran through the crowd, a collective gasp that felt like static electricity. The defendant leaned back in her chair, unbothered. For safekeeping. She was naive. The world is dangerous. Judy leaned forward now, chin resting lightly on her hand. "And where exactly were you employed when all this happened?" The defendant blinked, just once, just long enough for the mask to slip. "I maintained my role," she said, unofficially. Judy's silence returned with full weight. The defendant's smile twitched, the first visible fault line. "Let me rephrase," Judy said softly. "Were you still part of an active diplomatic household during this time?" The defendant straightened abruptly. "Your Honor, my status does not need your validation." Judy's eyes narrowed, slow, deliberate. A quiet warning bell. She turned to the clerk. "Bring me the employment document the producers flagged earlier." The defendant's breath hitched, just slightly. Her smile faltered for the first time, and the courtroom felt the shift. The truth was beginning to surface. The defendant's smile lingered, stiff now, stretched too thin across her face. Judy had not even opened the file yet, but the room already sensed it. Something in the defendant's confidence had just shifted. A microscopic crack, but a crack nonetheless. The clerk placed the folder on the bench. Its weight felt disproportionate, like truth condensed into paper. Judy opened it slowly, her eyes scanning the first page. "Let us clarify your employment status," she said. The defendant lifted her chin. "As I stated, I maintained my diplomatic role informally. My husband's assignment concluded, but that does not erase my protections." Judy did not look up. "Informally," she repeated, as if tasting the word. "When exactly did his assignment end?" 6 months ago, the defendant answered, a bit too quickly. The plaintiff's breath caught, the audience rustled. Judy finally raised her eyes. 6 months, she said softly. "So during the time in question, you were no longer attached to an active embassy post." The defendant bristled. "We were still respected members of the diplomatic community." "Respected," Judy echoed. "Active is the word that matters here." For the first time, the defendant blinked more than once, rapid, uneasy blinking that betrayed a tremor beneath her polished exterior. She turned slightly, as if hoping the cameras would shift away. Judy continued. "The plaintiff claims she worked for you during this period. That means you were functioning not as a diplomatic employer, but as a private one. Is that correct?" "That is an oversimplification," the defendant snapped, the veneer cracking further. "You are misunderstanding cultural context." Judy tilted her head. "I am understanding dates. Dates are not cultural." A low murmur rippled through the courtroom. The defendant's breathing grew shallow. She smoothed her hair 3 times in quick succession, a nervous tic trying to hide itself in elegance. The plaintiff stepped forward, voice soft but steady. "She told me her diplomatic protection was still active. She said I had no rights here." The defendant shot her a glare sharp enough to wound. "Because you do not understand international protocol." "You told me I would be deported," the plaintiff whispered, "every day." The silence that followed was not empty. It throbbed, with fear, memory, and something darker. Even the overhead lights seemed to dim. Judy broke the quiet. "You threatened her with deportation while possessing no active diplomatic status?" The defendant's mouth opened, then closed. Words flickered and died in her throat. Her hand drifted to her handbag again, the same nervous touch from earlier, as if inside it lay the story she wished she could rewrite. Judy turned another page in the folder, her eyes narrowing slightly. Interesting. This document does not match what you just stated. A single bead of sweat slid down the defendant's temple. The audience leaned in. Judy's voice dipped into something quieter and far more dangerous. "Let us continue," she said. "There appears to be a discrepancy. And discrepancies in my courtroom usually mean someone is not telling the truth." The folder lay between them like a silent witness, unblinking, unshakable, waiting to speak. Judy's fingers moved across its surface with deliberate care, the way someone handles something both fragile and explosive. The defendant's eyes followed every motion, her posture stiffening as though the file might leap open and expose her on its own. "Let us take this one page at a time," Judy said, her voice calm enough to make the defendant nervous. A hush settled. The lights overhead hummed faintly, the only sound daring to exist in the space between truth and collapse. Judy lifted the first document. "This is your husband's official end-of-assignment notice, filed, stamped, and confirmed." The defendant nodded quickly, too quickly. "Yes, that is routine." "It is routine," Judy agreed, "but the dates are not." The defendant's smile flickered. "What do you mean?" Judy rotated the paper so the cameras and the plaintiff could see. "According to this, his assignment concluded on March 12th. Yet the employment document you provided lists you as an active diplomatic spouse through August." A visible tremor crawled across the defendant's jaw. "That is because," she stammered, "we remained in the country for transitions. Very common. Everyone does it." "Transitions," Judy repeated, turning to the next page. "And yet, this document here, the one the producers flagged, was notarized using an embassy stamp dated 2 months after your diplomatic privileges ended." A gasp hit the audience like a wave. The defendant's breath faltered. "Embassy staff make clerical errors all the time." Judy's eyes sharpened. "Do they usually make errors that benefit only the person presenting the document?" The defendant swallowed hard. Her hand drifted to her handbag once more, fingers tapping the leather like a telegraph of panic. The plaintiff watched quietly, her face a fragile mask of hope and exhaustion. Judy continued calmly, but each word struck like a gavel. "This stamp identifies you as still under diplomatic protection, yet its issuance date suggests it should not exist, not legally, not officially, not at all." The defendant straightened as if bracing for impact. "Your Honor, you are misinterpreting international protocol." "I am reading dates," Judy said. "Numbers do not interpret, they reveal." The room thickened with silence. Even the bailiff's stance shifted, shoulders tightening a fraction. Judy lifted the final sheet. "And here we have the employment timeline you submitted. According to this, the plaintiff worked for you during the same period in which you claimed diplomatic immunity." "That is correct," the defendant whispered. "Except," Judy replied, staring directly at her, "you were no longer a diplomatic employer. You were a private one." For a moment the defendant's face emptied, wiped clean of all certainty, then she forced a laugh that cracked halfway through. "You do not understand. You cannot possibly understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," Judy said. She closed the folder with a soft but devastating finality. "You forged something here, and it was not the contract." The defendant reached for the expired ID card instinctively, as though clutching it might somehow rewind the last 30 seconds, but Judy's voice cut through the air, calm, measured, immovable. "Do not touch that," she said. The command froze the defendant mid-motion. Her hand hovered above the handbag, fingers trembling before she slowly pulled them back. The courtroom watched in collective silence, the kind of silence that follows a fracture when something powerful finally breaks. Judy lifted the questionable document again. "Diplomatic immunity," she said, rolling the words gently as if testing their weight, "is not a costume you get to keep wearing after the event is over." The defendant's lips parted, desperate to recover her footing. "Your Honor, these matters are complicated. You cannot expect a civilian court to—" Judy raised a finger. Just one. It silenced her instantly. "You were not a diplomatic spouse at the time you employed her," Judy continued. "You had no authority to confiscate her passport. You had no legal right to intimidate her, and you certainly had no right to present expired credentials as if they were active." The plaintiff inhaled sharply, a quiet, shaky breath she had been holding for months. Her shoulders softened just slightly, as though the truth had finally found space to breathe. The defendant shook her head. "You do not understand. This was never about intimidation. I was protecting her. She was inexperienced with American systems. I kept her passport for safekeeping." Judy's eyes narrowed. "Is that what you call it?" "She was free to leave any time," the defendant insisted, but the words wavered. "I was guiding her." The plaintiff spoke softly, each word trembling but true. "I asked for my passport every week. You told me I was not ready. You told me I would get lost or arrested. That is because you—" The defendant stopped herself, breath hitching as her composure flickered. Judy leaned forward. "Tell me something. If she was free to leave, why did you keep her documents? Why did you threaten her with deportation? Why did you continue to claim diplomatic protection you no longer had?" The defendant's voice thinned into a whisper. "Because she needed direction." "No," Judy replied, her tone turning colder. "Because you needed control." A ripple of emotion moved through the room, not loud, not chaotic, but undeniable. A shift in gravity. The defendant swallowed hard. The illusion she had wrapped around herself began to peel away, exposing something frail beneath it. Her confidence no longer sat upright. It slouched, trembling. Judy exhaled slowly, the calm before a deeper storm. "Immunity," she said, "is not granted to people who simply want to escape accountability. It is granted to those who serve a nation. Your service ended, your immunity ended, but your actions did not." The defendant's hands tightened into fists. Judy's gaze sharpened further. "Now, let us discuss the passport." The defendant closed her eyes. "Why?" Judy asked, voice razor-thin. "Did you keep your employee's identity locked inside your suitcase?" Her lips parted, but no sound came out. For the first time since she stepped into the courtroom, the defendant looked uncertain. The woman who walked in as if the room belonged to her now stared at the floor, caught in the gravity of a single question she could no longer outrun. Judy did not move. Her stillness carried more weight than any raised voice could. "I asked you," she repeated slowly, "why you kept her passport." The defendant swallowed, hard. I told you, for safekeeping." "No." Judy's response was clean, surgical. "That was the excuse. I am asking for the truth." The plaintiff's eyes glistened, not with tears, but with the ache of recognition. She had asked this question countless times in whispered desperation. Now it was finally being asked for her. The defendant shifted her weight. She smoothed her sleeve. She blinked too fast. Her performance, so perfectly rehearsed until now, began to crumble like wet paper. "She was naive," the defendant murmured, almost to herself. "The world is dangerous. I did not want her wandering around without guidance." Judy tilted her head. "Guidance does not require confiscation." "She could have been deported," the defendant snapped suddenly, voice cracking. "She could have gotten into trouble. And then what? I would be blamed." There it was, the slip, the fracture, the truth hidden inside the lie. "So it was about you," Judy said quietly. A murmur rippled across the courtroom, low and electric. The defendant's eyes widened. "No, it was—" "Do not finish that sentence unless you are prepared to tell the truth," Judy warned. Her voice did not rise. It did not need to. Authority radiated from every syllable. The defendant's jaw trembled. I needed her to stay," she whispered. "I needed stability. I was managing everything alone. My husband was already abroad, and I—" Her voice faltered, collapsing under its own weight. The plaintiff looked down, her hands clasped tightly around each other. The tremble in her shoulders was visible now. Relief, heartbreak, or both. Judy leaned in slightly. "So you kept her passport because you feared losing control." The defendant's silence was answer enough. "Let me be clear," Judy continued. "You held another adult's identification hostage. You used threats of deportation to maintain leverage. That is not cultural misunderstanding. That is coercion." The defendant blinked rapidly, as if trying to hold her vision steady. Panic seeped into the elegant edges of her voice. I did what I thought was necessary." "For whom?" Judy asked. The defendant had no reply. Judy tapped the bench lightly, once, shifting the courtroom's focus. "Bailiff, bring me the suitcase." The defendant stiffened. The plaintiff gasped quietly. The room seemed to inhale all at once. The bailiff walked forward, placing the small silver suitcase on the desk. A faint rattle sounded inside, metallic, unmistakable, and damning. The defendant's face drained of color. Judy placed her hand on the latch. "Let us see," she said, "what you were really keeping safe." The silver suitcase sat on the desk like a quiet accusation, small, polished, deceptively innocent. But the rattle inside it carried a weight the defendant could no longer hide beneath elegance or titles. Judy unlatched it slowly. The click of metal echoed through the courtroom louder than any shouted confession. The defendant's breath hitched, her shoulders tightened as if bracing for an earthquake. When the lid opened, the room leaned forward as one. Inside lay neatly stacked belongings, a sealed envelope, a folded blouse, a charger cord, a travel comb, mundane items, harmless at first glance. But beneath them, tucked with meticulous precision, was the truth. Judy removed the envelope first. It was thin, paper-yellowed at the edges, but unmistakably official. She slid out the contents. A passport. The plaintiff's passport, bound with a rubber band as if it were a receipt rather than a person's identity. The plaintiff's hand flew to her mouth. The defendant's face drained of color. Judy placed the passport on the desk gently, almost reverently. "This," she said, "does not belong to you." The defendant's lips trembled. "Your Honor, I was protecting—" "Stop," Judy said without looking up. The word landed like a gavel. She reached into the suitcase again and pulled out a second item, a phone, powered off, screen cracked along the corner. The plaintiff whispered, "She took that from me too." A murmur rippled like wind through dry leaves. Even the cameras seemed to zoom closer, capturing every micro-expression as the defendant's confidence disintegrated. Judy examined the phone, then the passport, then the defendant, a slow, deliberate triangle of judgment. "So you restricted her identity and her communication," Judy said. "Tell me, what exactly was she free to do?" The defendant's eyes darted wildly, searching for an explanation that might still carry weight. "She was overwhelmed. I was simplifying things. She needed structure." "Structure," Judy repeated, her voice hollow with disbelief. "Say what you mean." The defendant's breath shuddered. She might have left." "And you could not risk that," Judy pressed. The defendant's silence answered for her. Judy reached into the suitcase once more. Her hand emerged with a final document, a thin, unsigned confidentiality agreement, typed neatly, the plaintiff's name written in ink along the top. The room inhaled sharply. The plaintiff shook her head. "She said I had to sign it before she would pay me." Judy looked at the defendant. "This is not structure. This is not guidance. This is control, absolute and intentional." The defendant closed her eyes, a single tear sliding down her cheek, not from remorse, but from the realization that the persona she had clung to was slipping beyond her reach. The air felt heavier now, as if truth had changed its density. Judy closed the suitcase with a soft thud, final and cold. She turned to the defendant, gaze sharpened to a blade. "Explain to me," Judy said, "why a woman who was allegedly free kept all her freedom locked in your luggage." Her hands hovered over the suitcase as if she were trying to shield it from the world, from Judy, from the cameras, from the truth finally catching up to her. But it was too late. The objects she once controlled had escaped her grasp, and the room no longer belonged to her. Judy leaned back slightly, not relaxed, controlled, like a storm choosing precisely when to strike. "Why?" she asked again. "Was her freedom stored in your luggage?" The defendant opened her mouth, but no words came out. Not yet. It was the long inhale before the avalanche. Her voice cracked. She swallowed, tried again. "I did not want things to get messy." Judy's brow lifted. "Messy?" "Yes," the defendant insisted, seizing the word as if it could anchor her sinking composure. If she left without warning, it could reflect poorly. My husband had already faced scrutiny in his career. Another scandal. "So this was about image," Judy said quietly. "No." The denial burst out too loud, too desperate. "I was trying to maintain stability. She was unpredictable, emotional. Stop deflecting," Judy interrupted. "You kept her passport because you were afraid she would leave. afraid she would speak, afraid she would expose what was happening in your home. The defendant's eyes widened, pupils trembling as if the accusation struck someplace deeper than pride. The plaintiff stood still, the truth vibrating through her like a pulse. She did not speak. She did not need to. Her silence held the weight of lived experience. The defendant inhaled sharply, her breath shallow and fast. "You do not understand what I was dealing with. My husband was abroad. His contract ended abruptly. There was pressure, judgment, rumors." "And so you transferred that pressure onto her?" Judy asked. The defendant froze. Her lips trembled, searching for a version of the story she could live with. "I needed help," she whispered. "I needed someone to stay. I could not afford another failure." Judy stared at her, the air between them vibrating with unspoken truth. "You controlled her because you lost control of your own life." The defendant's breath caught, an involuntary hitch that revealed everything pride had been hiding. Tears welled in her eyes, but they did not fall. Emotion clung there, suspended, refusing to betray her completely. "I did what I had to," she murmured. "No," Judy said, voice soft but unmistakably firm. "You did what suited you." The defendant recoiled as if struck. "Tell me," Judy continued, "why did you show expired diplomatic credentials to the plaintiff? Why did you say she had no rights here?" The defendant's facade cracked with a sudden unfiltered burst of panic. "Because I thought it would work," she blurted out. "Because everyone always believed me before." A sharp gasp cut through the room. Judy's gaze sharpened like the click of a camera focusing. "And now?" The defendant stared at her own reflection in the polished surface of the suitcase and saw it clearly for the first time. She was no longer untouchable. Judy picked up a printed sheet the clerk had just delivered, crisp, official, unmistakable. "This," Judy said, lifting the document, "is from the State Department, and it contradicts every word you have just spoken." The paper in Judy's hand felt heavier than its weight, the kind of document that does not just reveal truth, but rewrites the room around it. The defendant watched it like someone watching a fuse burn toward a bomb. Judy placed the sheet flat on the bench, smoothing it once, deliberately, as if giving the defendant a final opportunity to steady herself. She did not. "This," Judy said, "is an official communication from the United States Department of State." A gasp fluttered through the courtroom, a soft ripple of shock that seemed to dim the overhead lights for a moment. The defendant shook her head, barely perceptible. There must be some misunderstanding." Judy ignored the interruption and read aloud, voice sharp with clarity. "Your diplomatic protections concluded on March 12th. Any use of expired credentials after that date constitutes misrepresentation and may result in referral for further review." The defendant's breath fractured. "That cannot be right. They told me—" "No," Judy cut in. "They told you exactly this. According to this email, they warned you about presenting yourself as an active diplomatic spouse." The defendant blinked, 3, 4 times, each blink slower, heavier, sinking into panic. I did not receive that," she stammered. "My husband handles—" "Your husband," Judy said calmly, "is not the one who presented expired credentials to your employee. You are." The plaintiff clasped her hands together. Her chest rose and fell, quiet but fierce with relief. For the first time, the truth she carried alone was being spoken by someone with the power to make it matter. Judy continued reading. "Furthermore, we note recurring reports concerning misuse of expired identification during domestic employment interactions. We recommend further inquiry." A sharp, startled murmur cut across the audience. The words "further inquiry" did not need explanation. They were ice on bare skin. The defendant's posture collapsed an inch, as if gravity had suddenly increased. "Your Honor, I swear, I only showed the credentials because it is how people recognize me. They take me seriously when—" "When the truth is not enough?" Judy asked quietly. The defendant's eyes glistened, fear, not remorse. She gripped the edge of her podium. "You do not understand what my life has been like. Everything I built depended on how people perceived me. If I looked weak—" "You used government documents to avoid looking weak," Judy said. "You used your employees' fear to maintain your image." The plaintiff looked up, her voice trembling but audible. "She told me I had no rights." She made me believe she could have me removed from the country." The defendant shut her eyes, tears slipping onto her cheeks, the first tears of the day, too late to be redemption. Judy folded the email slowly, decisively. "This is not about culture. This is not about misunderstanding. This is about deception." The defendant swallowed, throat tight. "Please, I never meant—" Judy raised a hand, stopping her. "Do not say you never meant it. You lived in it." The defendant's shoulders sagged, the last remnants of her certainty draining away. Judy leaned forward ever so slightly. "Tell me," she said, voice icy calm, "were you planning to leave the country before this hearing? Because this email suggests you were." The question landed like a dropped stone in water, silent at first, then rippling outward in widening circles of dread. The defendant's eyes darted toward the suitcase still sitting on the desk, the metal edges catching the light like a quiet accusation. Judy noticed. "Bailiff," she said without looking away from the defendant, "open the outer pocket." The bailiff complied. The zipper's soft rasp seemed unnaturally loud. He reached in and withdrew a folder, slim, glossy, unmistakably travel-related. When he opened it, a stiff sheet slid out and fluttered onto the podium. A plane ticket, the kind printed on heavy cardstock, the kind purchased with certainty. The defendant's breath stuttered. That has nothing to do with," the bailiff read aloud. "One-way ticket. Departure date 2 nights ago. Destination, Barcelona." A collective exhale swept through the courtroom. Judy's gaze sharpened. "Barcelona," she repeated, "not your home country. Not a diplomatic posting. A city with no repatriation agreements for domestic labor disputes." The defendant's hands trembled. "It was a visit. I was planning to—" "Leave the country," Judy finished, "before this hearing." The plaintiff covered her mouth, not in shock, in recognition. She had felt this possibility in her bones long before seeing the proof. Judy turned to her. "What did you fear most would happen if she left?" The plaintiff swallowed, voice soft but steady. "That I would lose any chance to get my passport back, that no one would believe me, that I would be stuck here without identity, without home, without justice." Her words trembled, but they did not break. The courtroom held its breath. The defendant wiped her palms against her skirt, a gesture so frantic it betrayed the truth she could no longer outrun. "This is being dramatized. That ticket was flexible. I could cancel any time. I was stressed, overwhelmed." Judy cut her off with a raised hand. "You intended to leave, that's clear. But what concerns me more is the timing." "The timing?" the defendant whispered. "Yes," Judy said, leaning forward. "You purchased this ticket the same week the plaintiff informed production she was bringing evidence." The defendant froze, pupils shrinking. Judy continued, voice steady and devastating. "You intended to vanish before accountability arrived. You intended to leave this woman stranded in legal and emotional limbo." The defendant's breath fractured. No, I only wanted a fresh start, at the cost of her future," Judy pressed. A single tear slipped down the defendant's cheek, then another, not remorse, fear. "We often see people run," Judy said, "but what matters is what they're running from. The suitcase, the passport, the lies, the unraveling. It all converged around her like closing walls." "Were you," Judy repeated, slower this time, "or were you not preparing to flee before this case was heard?" The defendant's voice finally cracked open into raw honesty. "I didn't think she would fight back," she whispered. "No one ever has." Judy looked at her for a long, silent moment, a look that weighed more than any gavel strike. "Then it's time," Judy said softly, "for someone to speak who's been silent too long. Plaintiff, what were you most afraid of losing if she disappeared?" The plaintiff hesitated only a second before stepping forward, but in that second, the entire courtroom seemed to lean into the space she left behind. Her voice had been quiet, careful, almost apologetic since the hearing began. But now, as she lifted her head, something changed. The trembling softened. The shame loosened its hold. Her fear, once a shadow, prepared to step into the light. She clasped her hands together tightly, a gesture of protection and courage intertwined. "I was afraid," she began, voice steadying with each word, "that if she left, I would disappear with her." A hush rolled across the gallery. The defendant flinched, subtle but unmistakable, as if the plaintiff's words pierced through her final fragile layer of denial. Judy nodded softly. "Explain what you mean." The plaintiff exhaled slowly, gathering breath like someone remembering how to breathe underwater. "She had my passport. She had my phone. She told me she knew people who could take care of things if I ever caused trouble. I didn't know who to trust. I didn't know where to go. My identity was in her hands." She looked down, swallowing. "And if she left the country, then my identity would leave with her." The defendant's fingers tightened around the podium. "I never said, 'That is not how?'" Judy raised a hand without looking at her. The defendant fell silent instantly. The plaintiff continued. "There were nights I slept with my shoes on because I was afraid she might decide to leave before morning. I thought if she got on a plane with my passport, I'd be stuck here forever. Or worse, invisible." The word invisible hovered in the air, heavy, haunting. The defendant's eyes shimmered. For a moment, the mask of superiority gave way to something raw, something resembling recognition, a quiet, painful understanding of the damage she had inflicted. But Judy pressed on. "I want you to hear her," Judy said to the defendant. "Truly hear her." The defendant blinked hard, her throat tightening. I didn't know she felt that way." Judy's voice sharpened. "You didn't ask." A pulse of truth shot through the room. The plaintiff nodded slowly, tears finally forming, not from weakness, but release. "I wasn't scared of losing my job," she said. "I was scared of losing myself." She wiped her cheek quickly, almost embarrassed by the display, but the courtroom held her gently in its silence. The defendant's breathing grew unsteady, her perfect composure shattering like glass under pressure. I never intended to destroy her life," she whispered. Judy studied her, really studied her, with a calm, dissecting gaze. "Intent," she said softly, "does not erase impact." The defendant's lip quivered. For the first time, she looked genuinely small. Judy leaned forward. "But I think there is something you did intend, something you are still not saying." A flicker, a flash of fear, crossed the defendant's eyes. Judy tapped the bench once, a sound like a trigger being pulled. "What?" she asked quietly. "Were you really afraid of if she left you?" The question hovered in the air like smoke, thin, quiet, but impossible to ignore. "What were you really afraid of if she left you?" The defendant stiffened, as though someone had reached into her ribcage and touched something she'd buried long ago. Her hands gripped the edge of the podium until her knuckles turned a ghostly white. The courtroom waited. Even the lights seemed to dim in anticipation. Her lips parted, closed, trembled. Judy didn't push, not yet. She simply watched, her gaze steady, unrelenting, but not cruel. It was the type of silence that opens a door and forces truth to walk through it. Finally, the defendant inhaled, the breath uneven. "If she left," her voice faltered. She looked down, eyes tracing the grain in the wood of the podium, as if searching for courage in its grooves. "If she left, people would start asking questions. About my status, about my visa, about why I was still here." The plaintiff's eyes widened, realization flickering like a match finally catching flame. The defendant squeezed her eyes shut, words spilling out like a confession she had held too tightly for too long. "My husband left. Not diplomatically. He left me. He didn't renew my documents. I was supposed to go home. But I couldn't. Not after the rumors. Not after what happened back there." A heavy silence fell. The courtroom didn't breathe. Judy leaned back slightly, giving her room. Not sympathy. Space. The defendant pressed a hand to her chest, as though stabilizing a crack beneath the surface. "If I went back without him, my family would say I failed. My community would say I embarrassed him. I had nowhere to go, nowhere that wouldn't look at me with pity or ridicule." Her voice thinned to a whisper. "I stayed because I couldn't face them." The plaintiff watched her, eyes softening not with forgiveness, but with the complex recognition of shared vulnerability, the understanding that even those who hurt others can be drowning in their own silent storms. "I needed someone to stay too," the defendant continued, a tremor running through her voice. "Someone to make the house feel normal, someone who wouldn't question why I was still here, someone who made me feel like my life hadn't already fallen apart." She wiped her cheek roughly, annoyed at her own tears. She wasn't just an employee. She was the last thread holding the illusion together. Judy's voice, when it came, was quiet but piercing. "So you trapped her to keep yourself from feeling trapped." The defendant's shoulders collapsed inward, as if Judy had spoken aloud a truth she'd never dared to name. A truth that didn't just expose her actions, it exposed her. "I never wanted to be the villain," she whispered. Judy didn't look away. Most villains don't. A tremble ran through the defendant's body, not dramatic, not loud, but genuine. A human earthquake. Her perfectly curated persona, the poise, the polished smirk, the diplomatic mask, finally fell away. What remained wasn't powerful. It wasn't untouchable. It was just a woman, scared and unraveling under the weight of her own lies. Judy gently tapped the bench. "Clerk," she said, "prepare the referral paperwork." The defendant's eyes snapped open. "Because now," Judy continued, "your circumstances require official attention." For a moment, no one moved. The courtroom felt suspended, caught between the last echo of Judy's words and the realization of what they meant. Official attention. The defendant's entire body went rigid, as though those two words had locked her joints in place. She blinked rapidly, shock overtaking her features. "Official attention? Your Honor, please, no, that isn't necessary. I can resolve this. I can make this right." Judy folded her hands, her expression neither cruel nor comforting, simply resolute. "What you can do is listen, because for the first time, the consequences you ran from have caught up with you." The defendant shook her head, a small, frantic movement. The composure she once wielded like armor was gone. All that remained was fear, clawing its way to the surface. "You don't understand. If this is reported, the embassy will hear. My family will hear. I'll lose everything." "You already lost everything," Judy replied gently. "You just didn't realize it until now." The plaintiff looked down, fingers twisting the edges of her sleeve. She wasn't gloating. There was no satisfaction in watching someone unravel, only a quiet acknowledgement that justice often comes wrapped in complicated emotions. The defendant took a shaky step forward. "Your Honor, I know I made mistakes, terrible ones, but I'm not a criminal. I never hurt her physically. I provided for her." "You controlled her," Judy interjected, "emotionally, legally, psychologically. That is harm." The defendant flinched as if struck. Judy continued, each word precise and grounded. "This is a civil arbitration. I cannot detain you. I cannot hand down a criminal sentence. My authority ends at restitution and factual findings. But what you did, impersonating diplomatic status, withholding identification, misusing expired credentials, these are matters the proper authorities should evaluate." Her voice softened, but the softness held steel. "And they will." A tremor ran through the defendant's body, her shoulders collapsing as though she were physically shrinking under the weight of her choices. "I never thought it would go this far," she whispered. "That," Judy said, "is exactly the problem." The audience watched quietly, not triumphant, not bloodthirsty, but struck by the sobering realization that arrogance often keeps climbing long after the ground beneath it begins to crack. Judy turned to the plaintiff. "You will receive full restitution, including unpaid wages and damages for the emotional and logistical hardship you endured." The plaintiff nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks, relief, exhaustion, and the slow, dawning possibility of reclaiming her life. The defendant let out a broken sound, somewhere between a sob and a gasp. "I can't go back," she murmured. "You don't understand. If immigration investigates me, if the embassy finds out I stayed past my authorization, I could be—" Judy's gaze held hers, unwavering. "Actions have consequences, especially when you pretend the rules don't apply to you." The defendant shook her head harder, panic taking full shape now. "Please, there must be another way." Judy tapped her pen once, a sound sharp enough to slice the air. "Before I issue my final ruling," Judy said, "there is one more thing I want the plaintiff to tell this courtroom." The plaintiff stepped forward slowly, not timidly, not fearfully, but with a quiet resolve that seemed to straighten the very air around her. For the first time since the hearing began, she no longer looked like someone defending her existence. She looked like someone reclaiming it. Judy watched her with a softened gaze. "You may speak," she said. "Say whatever you need this courtroom to hear." The plaintiff nodded, drawing in a long, steady breath. Her voice emerged gentle at first, but clear. "I don't want revenge," she began. "I want to feel human again." Every sound in the courtroom faded into stillness. Even the defendant, shaking and small behind her podium, lifted her head, not out of defiance but out of a dawning awareness that she was about to hear the truth she had spent months silencing. The plaintiff continued. "When I came here to work, I believed I was beginning a new chapter, something hopeful. I believed her when she said she would help me. I trusted her." Her fingers knit together, but her voice did not waver. "But slowly, I stopped feeling like a person. Every day I was told what I couldn't do, what I wasn't allowed to ask, where I wasn't allowed to go. I stopped making eye contact. I stopped speaking up. I stopped dreaming." A tremor ran through the defendant's posture, guilt or grief, or the sting of seeing herself through someone else's eyes. The plaintiff swallowed hard. "I didn't want money from her. I wanted freedom. I wanted safety. And I wanted the right to make choices about my own life." Her voice tightened. "When she threatened me with deportation, I thought my life here was over. But when she took my passport, I thought I was over." A single tear ran down her cheek, but she brushed it away quickly. She wasn't breaking. She was rising. "I want the court to know," she said softly, "that I didn't stay because I was weak. I stayed because she convinced me that no one else would help me. She made me believe that the world outside her house was dangerous, when the truth was, the danger was inside." The defendant closed her eyes, tears slipping out despite her efforts to contain them. The plaintiff looked at her, not with anger, but with a profound, bittersweet clarity. "I don't hate you," she said, "but I will never understand why you chose to keep me small just to make yourself feel safe." Judy exhaled slowly, the weight of the testimony settling over the room like soft dust. "Thank you," she said. "You have been heard." The plaintiff stepped back, standing taller than she had at any point in this hearing. Judy lifted her gavel, slowly, intentionally, the promise of final judgment humming in the air. "It's time," Judy said, voice steady as a heartbeat. "Justice must speak next. Before we move to the verdict, do you believe people truly change, or do consequences simply reveal who they always were?" The gavel hovered in Judge Judy's hand, suspended like the final note of a symphony waiting to fall. The entire courtroom seemed to lean forward, not out of curiosity anymore, but out of a deeper need. A need for closure, for justice, for truth to settle into the space where fear once lived. Judy let the silence breathe. Then she lowered the gavel gently onto the bench. "This court," she began, her voice unwavering, "finds in favor of the plaintiff." The sound that followed wasn't applause nor shock, just an exhale, a collective release of tension that had wrapped itself around the courtroom since the moment the defendant first walked in with her chin raised and her certainty unshakable. Judy continued, her tone precise, every syllable crafted with intention. "You will compensate the plaintiff for every hour of labor withheld, every day of emotional hardship, and every documented action taken to restrict her freedom. Full restitution will be issued." The plaintiff blinked, tears gathering but not falling. She nodded, a hand pressed over her heart as though steadying it from rising too fast. But Judy was not finished. She turned her gaze to the defendant, not unkind but unflinching. The defendant looked hollow now, holding herself up not with pride but with the fragile remnants of a world she'd spent years constructing. "Additionally," Judy said, "the findings of this case, including the misuse of expired diplomatic credentials, the confiscation of identification, and your admitted false representations of immunity, will be forwarded to the appropriate federal authorities." The words landed softly, but the impact was seismic. The defendant closed her eyes, breath shuddering outward. Not the dramatic collapse of someone wronged, but the quiet unraveling of someone finally facing the truth they had run from. Judy's tone softened, but only slightly. "I want you to listen carefully. You used fear as a tool because you were afraid yourself. You tried to control another life because yours felt out of control. but personal desperation does not justify the destruction of someone else's dignity. The defendant's tears fell freely now. She did not wipe them. Judy continued. You are not powerless. You simply refuse to face the consequences of your choices. And when we refuse to face our truths, we make others carry the weight of them. The plaintiff lowered her gaze, overwhelmed, not by triumph, but by the gravity of finally being seen. Judy leaned forward, delivering the final note of the verdict. Today is not about humiliation. It is about correction. It is about accountability. And it is about ensuring that every person, regardless of status, culture, or circumstance, retains the right to control their own life. A long, reverent silence followed. Then, Judy spoke one last time, voice quiet but firm, shaping the moral that had lived beneath every moment of the case. Power borrowed from titles fades, power taken through fear collapses, but truth always stands. She struck the gavel. The echo rippled outward, filling the courtroom, settling into each listener, and leaving behind the final judgment. Arrogance can pretend to be power, but it cannot survive the light of truth.